Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith, addressed the 49th sessions of the United Nations Human Rights Council today, where he took up the issue of delayed justice for the victims of the Easter Sunday terror attacks. Calling the issue a serious violation of the fundamental rights of the victims of the attacks, His Eminence called upon the UNHRC and its member countries to support the continuation of evidence gathering initiated by the Council last year and devise a means to ensure the truth is finally revealed.
The first impression of this massacre was that it was purely the work of a few Islamic extremists. However, subsequent investigations indicate that this massacre was part of a grand political plot. Despite our repeated requests and those of civil organizations pursuing the truth, the incumbent government of Sri Lanka has failed to mete out justice to the victims. Instead of uncovering the truth behind the attack and prosecuting those responsible, there are attempts to harass and intimidate those who clamor for justice. As a result, nearly 3 years after the horrendous crime, we are still in the dark as to what really happened on that Easter Sunday.
Meanwhile, delivering her concluding remarks for the day, Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights Nada Al-Nashif outlined measures that member states could choose to implement against Sri Lankans accused of human rights violations. These would include individual sanctions used by countries within their own jurisdictions. These, she added, could give victims a symbolic sense of justice.
With respect to accountability, because Sri Lankan domestic processes have repeatedly failed to deliver justice, the High Commissioner's reports have already elaborated a menu of options that can be pursued, including at the international level. These are not exclusive, they can be combined. Some accountability measures, judicial and other, are open to the use by member states within their own jurisdiction. We have already seen a number of cases in which Sri Lankan perpetrators from various sides have faced different forms of jurisdiction, including universal. Another option, of course, includes applying targeted individual sanctions to credibly alleged perpetrators of serious crimes. These should be considered for all parties responsible, both state and non-state actors. And there are examples of Sri Lankans being subject to travel bans. And while sanctions, even targeted, are important symbolically, they can also lead to a sense of justice for victims and their families.
Meanwhile, Sri Lanka saw overwhelming support against the resolution from countries representing the Global South. Of the 45 countries that spoke today, 31 expressed support for Sri Lanka's domestic reconciliation efforts. They also underscored the importance of the Council supporting voluntary national processes and also highlighted the fact that the Council's resolution that led to the written update did not have Sri Lanka's consent, which could set a dangerous precedent.
I note in particular the statement made by Catholic Cardinal Ranjith to the Council just a few minutes ago, highlighting the inadequacy of the investigations that have been carried out to date. While some people are now being prosecuted for their association with the attacks, victims have demanded that the government publish a full account of the circumstances that permitted those attacks, in particular the role of the security establishment. I note that additional evidence from the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the attack has now been shared with Parliament. Publishing the complete findings of the Commission of Inquiry into the bombings is essential to ensure transparency for victims and also to pursue further independent investigations into the involvement of any other state or non-state actors.
We also appreciate the important achievements made in promoting reconciliation and reconstruction. In this regard, HRC Resolution 46/1 is not in line with the principles of impartiality, objectivity, non-selectivity and non-politicization, nor has it been endorsed by the country concerned. Therefore, it will only hinder the promotion and protection of human rights and national reconciliation in Sri Lanka. We call on relevant parties to respect Sri Lanka's sovereignty, political independence, and the path of human rights development of their own choice in light of their national conditions, to engage in constructive dialogue and cooperation, and to stop politicizing human rights issues or using human rights as a pretext to interfere in the internal affairs of Sri Lanka.
The Council resolution which gave rise to the written update does not have the consent of Sri Lanka. This creates a dangerous precedent requiring the office to collect criminal evidence for future prosecution reconciliation, a mandate which was not given it by Resolution 48148 of the General Assembly, which established its mandate. Venezuela rejects any interference in the domestic processes of Sri Lanka as it moves towards a definitive national reconciliation. This council must continue to support the efforts of Sri Lanka and its dignified people on the basis of genuine dialogue and cooperation.
The Human Rights Council was established to promote and protect human rights through cooperation and genuine dialogue to strengthen the capacity of member states to comply with their human rights obligations. In this regard, it is fundamentally imperative that the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights ensures that implementation and execution of its mandate is at par with the spirit, tenor, and letter of its founding resolution GA 6251. Needless to say that the sovereignty of Sri Lanka and indeed all member states can only be guaranteed by upholding the principles of universality, objectivity, and non-selectivity, as well as the elimination of double standards and politicization in this esteemed council.
Sri Lanka is a very close friend and neighbor of the Maldives. We believe that the country is well positioned to find solutions within its democratic processes.
This exercise is not something that enjoys the support of the country concerned. We ought to be aware that any mandate of this kind will only contribute to double standards and politicization which have begun to dominate this body and will in no way promote the enjoyment of human rights.